Right, today I'm going to be doing what's loosely termed nowadays Euro-nymphing, but mine's with what they call a French leader. Some of you are probably aware of it. Martin's going to do his streamers and predator stuff. I'll go through what this is first. That's a 10 foot for a 2. It's a 4 weight. A lot of the time you probably fish slightly lighter with a 3 weight, but with water being so high this year, we've been plugging away with this 4 weight. What keeps this apart from your normal 9 foot, 10 foot rod, it's a little bit longer. It has that ring here. You're fishing with a very long nylon leader. In this case it's 12 metres of nylon on the end of a nymph line. If you fish competitions, you've got to fish a lot shorter. They're only allowed to fish 2 rod lengths of nylon. But if you're just fishing normally, you can fish as long a line as you want. And this is the French leader. The actual leaders, some people just fish straight nylon, Maxima, or they just fish a big long length of the bicoloured indicator line. But I don't. This is tapered from 12 pounds to 30 pounds. So it's like a big long tapered dry fly leader really, but it's still fairly, that's 12 pound at that end. Onto that you have an indicator to see the takes. This one's a little bit bigger than normal, just so you can see it out in the river. The normal one would just be bicoloured nylon. So that's green, black and red. And so you can see that in nearly any light conditions. But this one is a little bit of braid. This is a braided indicator. That's a little bit chunkier. It does cause a little bit more drag, but it'll be a lot better to see when I'm out on the river. To that, I've got, this is just 0.14, 0.12 later in the year. And if you've got a drought and it's down on the bare bones like it was last year, it even go down to 0.10. I have slightly longer than some lads would fish between that and the indicator, because sometimes I do a term, some people like to lay the indicator on the water a little bit. Younger lads and a lot of lads, you keep the indicator off the water altogether, but with me getting a bit older and that, I let mine drift onto the water a little bit. If you have it touching the water, you must extend it to your first dropper a bit to let your flies get in. Because as soon as that's on the water dragging, it starts to lift your flies and alter the path of the flies in the water. So I've that. So I've probably got 6-7 foot to my first fly.
Is that determined by the depth of the river?
No.
Just that's
yeah,
just the...
At times, when it's really been ripping through this last few weeks, I'll sometimes tie another 8-inch on top of that. And it's weird, if you think it's not fishing right, you're not getting chances, you're fishing a deep run, extending that bit to your indicator, even by 8 inches, you suddenly start catching fish and you think, whoa. So yeah, Martin, that sometimes does make a difference. From there, I've got about 2 foot, 2'6" to my tail fly. The flies themselves, could I just lay that with you? These are all tungsten beads, apart from there's a few in that top corner, for if it's really low and clear, them are just brass beads. All the rest in this side, apart from a few of Martin's streamers and an odd bits and bob, they're all 3mm tungsten beads, mostly on jig hooks. All the bright coloured ones are mostly for coloured water or winter grayling fishing. For trout, that sort of pattern, which is just a bog standard copper-headed pheasant tail, or a silver beaded pheasant tail. Sometimes with a red collar, if you're fishing early in the morning, you just need something before the fish are active, just something to spark a bit of interest. Mostly silver and copper would be your go-to colours now that this river's colouring out. The other side of the box, the one that's been fished with mostly this year, these are mostly 3.5mm beads. Same size hooks, just bigger beads. I've actually got a 3.5 on that and a 3 on the dropper. I might have fished 2 or 3.5s if I was really intending catching fish here. But I'd lose a lot of flies, and I really don't want to lose flies while you guys are watching and take me 10 minutes to put a new leader back up. Again, all the dual colours, them's nearly empty because I've been fishing with them for a month. Them's copper, silver the same, just pheasant tails with silver and copper beads, 90% of the season them. All these bright colours are either grayling or floodwaters. That's been a brilliant fly the last few weeks. When it's been in flood, that with that orange tag. Brownies always like March brownie coloured flies. Partridge, hares here, but with that orange tag's been brilliant the last month. Picked a lot of fish up on that. And these are the same, coloured water, just a bit of sparkle. Or you fish them early morning before the sun's up. You just need something when the fish aren't active to stir them up. Basically everything else is a variation. Most other coloured beads are just handy if somebody else has fished through a bit and you want to follow them up. If you're fishing through, you're not catching, try white, can be good. Black, if it's really pressured. If you went to New Zealand or somewhere, black is the preferred bead colour in New Zealand without a shadow of a doubt. You can get your purples, you get every colour you can imagine in beads, but most of them are change colours now. And a lot of lads will put thoraxes in. We fish a bit in America, that pink thorax one does well at the back end in September when them fish are starting to get a bit territorial and they start to think about spawning. You can start fishing a bit of black and a bit orange. Fish start to get aggressive. And then in one corner, these are big stone flies. Them are just like fishing in a flood, or if you see the big stone flies coming off, or you've got a really big heavy run, you put one of them on to take it down, but them lads will catch fish as well. Them's got rubber legs, but they're just hares ears, basically. And that's the fly selection, but really copper and silver just in pheasant tails or hares ear, and you needn't worry. So we'll go out onto the river and I'll show you what we intend to do. You don't fish a very long line a lot of the time. It's a little bit slow in this first bit. Now you've got to adapt your casting stroke because you've got no fly line. So it's more of a lob than a, if you do a really sharp cast, it just doesn't work at all. It's more of a lob. You get out, there's a bit of current. If you're fishing for grayling, you'll fish downstream like that. Even though you're not shuffling, by the nature of you just walking down a river, you take a cast a step, that disturbs the bottom, and grayling are a lot more tolerant of human activity. That was a fish, they'll come in and feed below you while grayling. So if you're grayling fishing, you would fish it like that. Maybe you're in a run, this is December time, so you've got heavier flies on then. But then it would fish right below you, and it's often worth just doing that when you're grayling fishing, because them grayling will be in your slipstream. In fact, there's been competitions on the Welsh Dee and that, 3-man competitions, where 2 would stand in the river, they weren't allowed to fish, and the other lad will cast in behind the 2 anglers, 2 that make an artificial lie actually. Trout you would tend to fish upstream more. It's a little bit deeper, you're usually fishing a riffle. So you'd cast up like that, follow it back, keeping it taut, and pull it out there. Follow it round. That's not fishing too bad. It's probably fishing a little bit light. Just follow that back, and when you get the tension, go into your back cast. Watch the sighter all the time. If the sighter does anything strange, strike. If you're up above the bridge in that riffly water, you would keep going like this, but you would take like as if you're casting into a drafts board, into the squares. So you'll cast there. That's too much. Sorry. You'll cast there, and work that out in a fan until you've covered it all, and then just take a step upstream. You dead drift this quite a lot of the time. It is quite active, you've got to keep up with everything. You see more of a lob than a dry fly cast anyway.
So do you ever gink your indicator up, Mick, just to keep it?
Yeah, I've greased that up.
Right.
Sorry, good to mention that, Martin. That's greased up with muslin. Muslin's by far the best. Gink will only last a couple of minutes. And it doesn't matter if you gink a bit of your leader above the indicator as well. If you're in faster water fishing upstream, you just imagine that's drifting back before you. I often say to people, put one hand behind your back and just fish like that. And you just fish a rod length. Keep it all tight, fetch it back towards you. It'll come back pretty quick. Once it gets so you've got to cast, just cast. And the action of actually casting will induce a take. So you'll often get a fish like that. Some days they don't want it dead drifted. Little trout. Some days they don't want it drifted, so you might have to lead that slightly quicker than the current. So you do that, and that'll induce them off the bottom to come and lift and take it. Trout are a lot more tolerant than grayling. They'll take higher in the water, especially when they're active. Grayling seem to be at bottom or they're rising. Trout will feed mid-water more, and you can lift them up off the bottom to take this, especially in the summer months. As soon as I even say there was a fish rose there now, just throw it out in front of it and pull it back like that, back on the current. Not so the current's dragging it, that was maybe a bad example. But if there's a fish rose there, just lift your rod and pull it right through it, 6 inch under top. And there's loads of times that fish will grab that. Another little trick is you you lift it in the water, just lift it and let it back down all the way. So all the way that's fishing round, it's jigging up and down. So that's giving you a total different presentation to the dead drifts like that. So you can imagine that fly's just dropped down and then he's floating along. Do that and it's going up and down in the water, and that can make all the difference sometimes. And really it's just a case of practicing your casting. Nearly forget about what you normally do. You've got to let the flies wait, keep your tension on the, let the flies get tension on your back cast and then flick it forward. Quite a sharp cast. Then what you can do, you've got your French leader on. I don't take 2 rods, so I've got this rod to fish one day. I've got a fly line in my back pocket. But you suddenly think, well, I've arrived at a bit middle of summer, there's a lot of weed growth, you've got channels in the weed, so, or you've maybe come to some pocket water, an island with boulders up the back of it or something. That's a big sedge. Snip your top dropper off. This will give you a totally different presentation as well. Fish is best in water maybe just above knee depth and shallower. Brilliant summer method. It's probably better with a fly line, but there you've quickly altered that. So you've got a big sedge. Big sedge is loads better than a clink. Put a clink on. I know it's called clink and dink. As soon as a clink drags, it's not fishing naturally. A big sedge, they think that's either a sedge, that they skid across the water. It's a big stone fly, they skid across the water. Middle of summer, that fish will be rising if he wanted to eat little food. If he wanted to eat black gnats, if he wanted to eat midge, it would already be rising because there's loads of stuff on the river in the summer. So what you do, you maybe wouldn't like a crisp, but somebody offers you a steak, you would have it. That's a steak to a trout. Not as big a steak as Martin will give it in a minute. But and what you do, you don't drift that a lot. But the presentation you get with that, which we didn't call it clink and dink, we call it the duo. And you either do the checkerboard or you throw that in a little hole. Don't let it drift like that too long.
So we're just looking for an instant reaction when that,
yeah,
when that flat dry fly lands.
In Spain with a local guide called Juan, and between a lot of lads it was known as Juan style. I'll show you how quickly this lad fished, but I can't do it anymore, big style. And that is literally how often you cast. You could nearly count 2 and really fire it in. If you're in fast water, fire that in it so that you're in a pocket. That nymph goes immediately to the bottom, and then what you're doing, you're firing it in and then you're whipping it back out. So what it's done, it's gone down on your tip, on your leader, it's got to a height, you've ripped it back out, and that fish is there thinking, where the hell did that go? I was just going to eat that. So you throw it back in, the next time it will just absolutely rip it. And that big fly, you don't get loads of refusals. They'll come up, nail that big fly, they'll just savage it. Whereas you have a little clink on, you've got your nylon really close to your fly, they'll come up and refuse it. But the big fly, you'll often get them on it, and that's a great method for in the summer, in among the weed beds, in among the boulders, in among the fast water. Probably not in bits like this is a little bit too deep. But even if you are drifting it, that's got a totally different presentation to the double nymph, what we've just been fishing. We don't call it Euro-nymphing, we call it double nymphing, the other one. But that gives you total different presentation. Sometimes they want it like that. It'll drift through at a certain level. There's a fish. A bit small, huh? But yeah, that's how quick you can change. And then in your bag, you've got a length of strong nylon, you've got a streamer. If you pause now when you're up the river, just put a long length of line on, put a little streamer on, fish the streamer back home. So it's a fairly versatile method for fishing 2 or 3 different variations on it just to get your fish. If you see a fish rise, just put a dry on. Put a dry on and a little nymph and cast over it. If there's not many fish rising, just cast over that fish. Put a little wee nymph on, an ordinary dry fly which won't sink it, and you've still every chance of catching it. And that basically is a quick run through on Euro-nymphing. Now over to Martin and his
Thanks for that, Mick. Yeah. So whereas Mick's was kind of like the finesse side of trout fishing and going and trying to pick fish off, this definitely isn't. This is a sledgehammer method of it. So I was going through with streamers. I don't know if anyone fish streamers. And if you fish reservoir flies, you kind of similar thing. We're just using it on running water. So we can use all sorts of different stuff. So I brought 2 rods down. So one is set up with a fast sinking line and a really big fly. We're just looking for like aggressive eats. This one is a 9'5" weight. This could be any 5 weight that you've got. As long as you can use a floating line, but you'd have to use a weighted fly pattern to get down. So these are the sort of flies I'm casting and using. So it kind of goes from massive, big, articulated patterns like this. You're looking for a reaction strike of turning the trout predatory. Basically, the second fish that Mick caught, we want one that's going to eat that and chase it. So we're using big, nasty flies. But we can go down to really finesse stuff, like Mick mentioned then, right at the end, using a streamer on a French leader. So you could use something small like that. You can just use it on mixed setup, flick it out and just dead drift it, but you can also twitch it and give it pulses. So yeah, there's all sorts in there. So different weights, different, some of them float, unweighted, sorry. And then you've got stuff like tungsten beads like this that get down. So that's a pattern that I came up with quite a few years ago now. Yeah, it's called the Martins. I don't want to. Yeah, it's caught quite a lot of fish all around the world, all different species as well. But that came. Yeah, it's caught salmon. That came about from a specific situation where on one of my local rivers there was a concrete ledge. I knew there was fish sat behind it. I just needed to get down to it. You put a nymph in it, it just got spit out straight away. So I came up with that pattern. But I'll pass that round. Let you all have a look at it and feel free to pick them out. And
do you generally use just beads, or do you add lead wire?
So some of them have got some lead dumbbell eyes like this one, but that's got a lot of deer hair in it. So we're trying to imitate little like skull pins and natural stuff that's in the river. But we're just trying to make that trout go from sat there like well, obviously just sat there and it's live. So that looks like a good meal. I'm going to come out and get that. So I've got two setups. So the sorry, the 9'5" is kind of most people have got a 9'5" fly rod, and if you've got floating line, you can just make up a leader. On this one, let's put it under that arm. Sorry. So on this rod, because I'm using a weighted fly, I've just got a slightly longer lead than what I'd use on my other rod. Just drop that on the floor. So that starts off with about 3 foot of 15-pound fluorocarbon, down to another 3 foot or so of 10-pound fluorocarbon. The only thing is, if you're using a floating line on a 5-weight, you can't go too long on your leaders because it gets to a point where your fly line's not casting your fly, it's the weight of your fly, and then it's flying around everywhere, especially with a 5.5 mil tungsten bead. If you get that back head, it does hurt a little bit. And then on the more dedicated streamer setup, which this is the LPX 6-weight Predator.
So there's just one line weight difference then?
Yeah, so 5's kind of a small stream stuff. 6 and 7, if we're fishing like this kind of on bigger flies, be on a 6 and a 7 weight. So this is a dedicated streamer line. So this is a streamer max, and because it's a bigger fly, we've got to use the weight of the sinking line to drag the fly down, get it to depth. Thank you very much. So you can see there the kind of makeup of this fly. There's a lot of deer hair in there. We're trying to make it create a lot of push and a lot of motion. We've got 2 hooks. Front one's probably like a 1/0. Rear one's about size 4. Linked by some wire for articulation. Lots of mobile fibres in there. We're kind of, and then it's dumbbell eyes, so we're kind of wanting that to dive and look injured. But on this one, on the full sinking line, I've got a shorter leader on, so I've got a couple of foot of 15 and maybe a foot of 10. But you can go down a lot shorter on that, because when a trout's chasing something like that, it's not tippet shy, it's focused on killing that, and that's its next meal.
Martin, will you sometimes wear a stripping?
Yeah, I've got one in here. So because streamer fishing is quite fast paced, I do a lot of pike fly fishing as well. I tend to wear a stripping guard, just so there's no friction. Then it slips through. Yeah, so it's attached by either like a Rapala or a lefty knot, or you can put it in a perfection loop. It just gives it that little bit more movement. Yeah, it's not restricted then. You can get all sort of wild and wonderful. You can go wild with colours, add rubber legs in it, just anything that adds movement. I tend to fish more natural kind of colours, so your browns, your tans, greens and olives. But for today, the yellow's quite visible. So yeah, I'll just get out onto the water and I'll run through casting and retrieves.
Yellow flying more dirty water?
Yeah, yellow and orange are really good in dirty coloured water. I'll grab that one back in a minute and I'll just show a different cast. So when I'm casting out and searching the river, I'm looking for little pockets and lies where they're going to be. I try most of the time. I'm casting across and upstream because I want that fly to come back over the top of a trout sideways. If I show you that fly now, you can see that it's quite big. If I show you that fly now, you've got no idea what it is. It's basically you're giving that trout as much time as you can to see that fly, and it's a case of I'm either hungry and I'm going to eat it. I don't want you in anywhere near me. I'm going to react to it. You might not get a hook up if it's just a reaction strike. It might be just a case of it might flash and knock you out of the way. But if you wear polarised glasses, it's quite a visual thing. If you keep an eye on where you fly, or roughly know where it's going to be, you might see flashes and fish moving about. So it will float a little bit because it's just dry, so it's got a little bit of buoyancy to it. But you can see there, just from dropping it in, how much movement that fly's got just by twitching that rod tip. It either looks dead or injured, or it's trying to flee. Get a bit of line. So it's just same as any other method, in the fact that if I'm breaking this water down now, I've got a feeding lane there, so I've got a chance there. I've got another different crease at the other side. It's a long cast from here today, but if I was on a smaller river, I've got far bank trees like that and little slack pockets and stuff, I'd be definitely firing a streamer into there and just trying to pull a fish out. Because it's a sinking head, it's kind of, you've got to just watch out for this around your feet, but it's quite a fast-paced method, so you're really working your fly back. So which is why I wear a stripping guard a lot of time, because there's no friction then between your fly line, it comes through pretty quick. So casting is always a double haul. And when I'm making that delivery cast, I'm casting through a loop in my fingers. So as soon as that fly hits that water, it's making a slap down. That trout's heard it. And the first thing that fly does, slaps, and I move it straight away. It's heard it and it's alive, it's got motion. Because I'm casting up into the flow, I've got to kind of fish it back slightly faster, so it's really fast paced, really working that fly. I'm constantly watching where it is and just tracking, see if there's anything chasing it. If I cast more across, I can fish it a little bit slower, but I've still got to beat the pace. It's still, I don't know how visible that is from up there, so that's probably fishing about a foot under the surface. It's probably like a DI7, this tip, but it's still only fishing about a foot deep. But in this kind of water, a fish that's really switched on and aggressive will come up and take that fly. So I cast out, it's hit the water, the first thing to do, I'm stripping, getting that fly moving straight away. Really working that rod tip, making that fly dart about. If I fish this way, so come off my back cast, I've got the flow there, so it's not going to get as deep, it's just going to sort of like swing round a little bit more. I can work that a little bit slower, just sort of like twitch it and play with it a little bit. But generally I tend to try and fish across and upstream rather than fishing down. Obviously you can swing the fly around, but I find that the hookups aren't as good. You lose a lot more fish on swinging a streamer. You get a lot of tail nips and stuff, so you don't always hook up on it. So we're just trying to work across. I wouldn't sort of like make too many casts in one area. I'd be looking at this, go through this in a few areas, through places. I'd be moving then, looking for a next spot, next likely holding line. And it's a double haul, just to get it out there. So if I'm using a heavily weighted fly and I'm not used to casting it, it's a big heavy bead, so if you come in making a normal overhead cast and you drop it by accident, you might rattle your rod tip. So if you're casting a heavy bead, you can oval cast so it's never coming into contact. So you're going up and over. So your rod tip's constantly making that oval, your fly's coming down underneath and it's going up and then going over the top of your rod tip, so it's never coming into the path of your rod tip. So this one, I would use this for smaller rivers really, the 5 weight set up with a floating line. This one has actually got a sink tip on it, but it's only a DI3, so it's not getting down very deep. I'm relying on the weight of the fly to get down there. If I've gone through there and I've just had a fish chase and I've missed it, it's not often you get another shot at it on a streamer. It's kind of like a one-shot method. You might get it, if you rest it and come back, you might pick that fish up again. But generally it's kind of one and done unless it's really switched on. So then if I've gone through where I think that there might be a fish and I've not caught on like a standard muted pattern, I change flies and go through again. Maybe it might be just depth where I've not got deep enough or I've the wrong colour for the day. But I find that most of the time just natural colours work pretty well. If you've not got any streamers at all, if you're into like stillwater fishing and you've got some tadpoles or fritz flies or anything like that, you can just get a shot, a piece of shot, and just nip it on in front and just cast it out. It's just a tadpole or something like that. But yeah, it's not really as finesse as mix, where it's a case of make your cast, retrieve it back and look for active fish. It's a very fast way of fishing. Can't really.
What time of the year is that best to do then?
So there's not really a right or wrong time of year. It's very good in coloured water. So if you've been out and you've got flood water, and you think, oh, it's too high to go out with nymphs or dry flies, streamer's very good because you will get fish pushed into the margins, obviously out of the main current. You can just go down the edge with a streamer. You don't even have to make long casts. You can just like especially with something like that, you can just make a short cast and just jig it back through little pockets and little holes. It's quite good on late at night as well as it's coming dark. But anywhere where you've got sort of like any cover or anything like that. It does get harder in the summer, it's like when it's in low water, but you can still catch them on streamers.
You get explosive hits though, don't
Yeah, that's what it is. You're just trying to make that fish turn predatory. But it's basically just a scaled down version of pike fly fishing or saltwater fishing, coastal fishing. But yeah, so I use these rods. I've got the 5, the 6, and I use the 9 weight for pike. They're brilliant. But like I say, if you're using, that's like more dedicated, sort of like you're going out to do it with that 5 weight, you can just put a fly on. If you've been out and fished dry fly or anything like that, you've had like Mick said, when you're walking back home, you can take your leader off, just put a bit of stronger tippet on. You can just fish back to your car. You probably will pick fish up that you've missed or you've not seen them rising, but there might be like a little soft spot around a bit of a log jam or something like that.
I've used jig hook streamers with
Yeah.
on the top. So
This one is like a jig, the side on a jig hook. This one, so it fishes hook up.
Are you catching more fish casting upstream than downstream?
Yeah.
That's my experience of it.
Yes, when you're fishing downstream, you've got the current working on you a lot of times. So your fly's fishing higher up, and a lot of time it's just tail nips. Whereas casting slightly upstream, you're coming across the current and you're giving that fish time from it going from its left to right or vice versa, that it can actually see that fly. Generally, when you do get a proper solid hook up, it's well and truly nail it. And on the articulated patterns, normally the strike is on the front hook. There's no doubt about it. That the intention of that fish was just to kill that fly.
If you see a fish chasing with the streamer, then if you see it, you slow down or do you
Speed it up a lot of time. Yeah, keep it interested. But obviously, sometimes you run out of water and you're around your feet and stuff like that. So, and the best thing to do is, if you do get a take, try not as hard, because obviously we're taught when you see a fish and it's taken to do this. The best thing to do with a streamer is to keep your rod tip down and just strip strike into it. So everything's in a straight line. All your tension then is directed straight into that hook point rather than flexing your rod tip into it. Because you're trying to drive like a bigger hook into a fish's mouth, so you want as much chance as you can just for that hook point to find its thing. So, you're welcome.